there, camp counselors. I'm Matt Hansberger. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the executive producer of podcasting at Go Camp Pro. And you are tuning in to First Class Counselors. And this is a series for camp directors to give to their counselors, or, just for camp counselors to listen to as you are preparing for the upcoming summer. Because great camp directors know that counselors have the most important job at camp, hands down. Their abilities make or break a camper's week, and campers won't come back to camp if their counselor sucks. So we want to help you be the best counselor that you can be so that kids come back year after year. And so thanks for tuning in, everybody. We're going to cover one specific topic and cover the essentials, the need to knows, the can't go withouts, the fundamentals, and the basics. And you might be wondering, hey, this just sounds like Matt's voice. Where is Oliver? Well, we'll cover that in a second, but let's get to what we're talking about first. Today, we are speaking to counselors who will be working at camp this coming summer, working at camp during a global pandemic. That's right. I say during a global pandemic, folks, because COVID isn't over just because we got a few million vaccines in people's arms. And there are a lot of things that are going to be different about this summer than any other year. So on this episode, we're going to give you the inside scoop on what being a counselor at a COVID-considerate camp is going to look like. So we'll cover what the on-the-ground perspective will be, what directors are going to expect from you, what to do if you're feeling overwhelmed, and some things to ask or understand before you start. And like I said, Oliver is away today. He's in full-on summer camp mode. So as we wish him the best in his first summer as an executive director at Camp Winona in Florida. By the way, you should send him a little note of encouragement. I think that would be really cool in his email, oliver.gregan, gregan.scd@gmail.com. Send him some love. It's his first year. He'll want that love. He'll appreciate it, I'm sure. And personally, I don't really think that I'm interesting enough to run a whole podcast by myself. Some people have probably already tuned out by now. So I have recruited a pro to talk about this topic. Someone who has not only been at camp, but ran a summer camp during a pandemic. And I mean, the same pandemic. He ran this camp last summer. Andy Pritikin is the director of Liberty Lake Day Camp in the Philly suburbs, and he is also the host of the Day Camp Pod, one of our podcasts here on the Go Camp Pro podcast network. It is a podcast for day camp professionals and budding day camp professionals, just like some of our listeners out there. And what better person to tell you about what a director is going to expect than a director himself? So friends, please give a warm round of applause out there. Help him hear it all the way from Philly. It's my friend, Andy Pritikin. Welcome to the podcast, Andy.
I feel like, oh my God, I'm coming back from the front lines after last summer. I mean, that's sort of what it was like. There's no doubt about it.
Okay. So Andy, we do something special to get to know our guests. We don't have a ton of guests on here, but to help us get to know you a little bit better, because people could go and listen to podcasts or they could look at your LinkedIn or whatever, but we want to get to know the real you in quick fire fashion. So we have some questions for you to help our listeners get to know you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Favorite campfire food?
Holy mackerel. Well, I'm not going to just take the perfect s'more kind of thing, because I'm sure that's like the typical number one Family Feud answer. I think a slightly burnt hot dog with hot mustard, that really gets me going. Like, that makes me know I'm at a campfire.
Love it.
To me, there's no easier food to make and more quickly satisfying food than a few of those bad boys.
Good. Sandals, shoes, boots, or bare feet?
Oof. I like my feet be able to breathe. Matt, I played basketball today. I played 5-on-5 basketball for the first time in a long time, now that I'm fully vaccinated, and I had a blast. So I love my high top basketball shoes, but I think all in all, sandals. I'm all about sandals. I mean, not during camp, and not on an airplane. I don't want to be sitting next to some guy with their gross toes, but I think, like, in general, if I'm on an island, desert island, I'm going sandals.
Nice. Perfect. Okay. A stupid human talent, such as being able to wiggle your ears or roll your tongue. What's something that you can do?
Holy mackerel. I don't know if I have a stupid human talent. I mean, I have real human talent. I can play like every instrument in the world.
I'll take that one. That's not a stupid one.
I think that's unique. I'm certainly fun at a party when it comes to that.
You should, our listeners out there, you need to Google around and find some history of Andy Pritikin in the music industry. That's all I'll say about it.
Yeah, just
do some Googling.
Yeah.
And his hair is much longer than what you see now in this podcast. Andy, a favorite podcast that you're listening to right now?
I listen to a lot of podcasts, but for all the camp pros out there or budding camp pros, I really, really have to endorse the Brene Brown Dare to Lead podcast, only
Mm.
found on Spotify, annoyingly so, but really, really awesome. I mean, really talks about leadership in a way that is both sophisticated and easy to listen to.
Nice. And last question, if you had a career that wasn't in camping, what do you think it would be?
Well, I was a teacher. I was a rock and roller. Um, I feel like a doctor. I think
Ooh.
that, being a camp director is a lot like being a doctor, or like running a hospital maybe. But I feel like helping people is really the ultimate. And, my son had cancer for 7 years, doing okay now. And those people that I met in those hospitals, I mean, even the like nurse practitioners and nurses and stuff, like they're just unbelievable humans. And for what they're going through now with the pandemic, and these overwhelmed hospitals and such, just as an aside, I spoke to a guy today, a camp parent that just moved here from India. And he was telling me what was going on in India
Yeah.
in early May. Holy crow.
Yeah.
Nuts, nuts.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a new one. But I
All
mean, I
right.
could easily say rock and roll star. I mean, my dream had been to be playing stadiums,
Mm,
to adoring fans, and now I do have my Friday afternoon concerts at my camp. That's about
nice.
where I get my jollies now.
Good stuff. All right. Dr. Pritikin, potentially one day.
I
Who
don't know,
knows?
Matt. I
All right.
never thought of that until this stinking question
I
here.
like it. Good. Good. That's what we want here. Okay. Let's dig into it. So, running a camp during a pandemic, a lot of us listening might not have experienced that because not a lot of camps ran last summer. Is that right?
Correct. I think it's like 70 to 80% of camps did not run last summer in
Huh.
North America.
Wow. So this is going to be a lot of our listeners' first time working at camp in a pandemic, whether they're brand new to camp or a returning staff member. This is going to be their first time working during a global pandemic. So we want to get into what it's going to be like so that people aren't taken by surprise. Let's talk about the returning staff first. So these staff, you've worked at camp for a couple of years. You think you kind of know the ropes. You might have worked at camp for like 5 or 6 years as a counselor or frontline staff. And now you're coming to Liberty Lake this summer. What's it going to be like?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And frankly, it's a lot more important question than the new staff, because new staff, they have very little expectations. Old staff expectations are that it's going to be the way that camp has been. And one
Mm,
of the beauties of camp is that it's sort of the same. You come back and it's sort of the same. Oh, look, Hansberger has a beard this year. It's like, but that's really it, because we still have lunch at 12 and we have, all that stuff. So um, it's really, really important that the camp set the expectations of how it's going to be different. And so it's going to be different. We know that. There's going to be
yeah.
masks involved. There's going to be social distance involved. There's going to be a lot of hand washing involved. They're not going to be able to intermingle the groups. Like, those are the basics. Okay. But let's just go to the other side of things really quick. And let's talk about what's the same. Because one thing that any camp person that worked at a camp last summer will tell you is that despite the differences in what we experienced, the essence of camp was the same. Essence of camp meaning working with people, socialization, working with children, making the world a better place. Kumbaya can start singing right now. So that is the same. That's what is important.
Right.
And all the other stuff is not. And for people to think for a second, for a moment, oh my gosh, it's not going to be like it usually is at Camp Kumbaya, that kind of like saying that like in a negative way. First of all, not true, because the essence of camp is still there.
Right.
All that other stuff is window dressing.
Mm,
Okay. Whether you're playing Gaga with just your group or with another group, whether you get to sing lead in a play, whether you, whatever, like all this other stuff, it's all trivial. It's just so not important. And camps that ran last summer are literally downscaling their programs for the rest of time now,
mm,
because they realize that they've sort of created these Frankenstein monsters of camp programs to try
right.
to make everybody happy every year. And they created these beasts that are actually too hard to manage and do really well. Because if you create this giant program, you could do it all really mediocre. It's
Hmm.
if you simplify things, you can actually do that phenomenally. And with these kids coming out of what they're coming out of, which is all different versions of hybrid school situations, and frankly, kids who have literally been home for 16 months, okay? It doesn't matter what you're doing at camp, as long as your loving self is there taking care of kids and socializing them and playing. You can play marbles and dominoes with these kids and they will be thrilled about it. So essence of camp remains. What is different is what you have to set your expectations on is that if you worked at camp, one of the best parts of camp was hanging with your bros, was hanging out with your friends. And let's say that you're in the junior division at this camp, which is all of the 9 and 10-year-olds or something, right? Usually it's, all of the counselors in the junior division become like a family also, and they
Right.
become super tight.
Right.
And they hang out with each other and maybe even more than that at points.
Mm.
So unfortunately, if we're going to have to like socially distance and take care of ourselves like that, and not everybody's been vaccinated, I was talking to our friend Shendi up in Canada, was telling me how slow the rollout's going up there,
Very
right?
slow. Yeah.
Uh, so if that's happening and we're not going to be able to be one happy family jumping all over each other like we usually are,
Yeah.
that's expectation has to be set, because if your camp group of friends, of staff, that is not a pod. That is not a cohort.
Right.
So they can't all go out together and be hugging and loving each other, because then if one person tests positive, you're all going down. Right. If your whole lifeguard team, and they're usually very tight, the lifeguard team, if they all go out and one person tests positive, you're not going to have lifeguards at your camp for 10 days. That's not going to be good.
Right.
So setting those kind of expectations as to, how you're going to sort of fill that gap emotionally. Right. And to me, again, it's setting expectations. I worked really hard last summer, sending out YouTube videos, sending out emails, just constantly contacting on a weekly basis from this point forward to camp, setting expectations so that they would know, because that's the tough part. A young person doesn't want to show up and be like, oh, well, I thought.
Yeah.
No good.
For sure. Well, and I think what you're speaking to is that, we often say on this podcast, one thing I like to say is that every year you go back to camp, it becomes less and less about yourself. And every camp out there and every great camp counselor knows that camp is for the kids. We put the kids first. And it sounds like to me that this is the summer where like the rubber hits the road on that. This is the summer where we truly put the kids first, because you get so many great things about being a camp staff member. And one of those things, again, we talk a lot about the friends that we've made. I met my wife at summer camp, and it might be a little bit different, but you'll still connect with those people. It'll just have to be in different ways, and your camp there'll be some accommodations for that. They'll find a way that you'll get some of that socialization.
Yeah.
But remember, the point is to be there for these kids who have just been in the weirdest school year of their lives, right? They're in even more of like a classroom in the middle of winter. If you're up in Canada, we had a brutally cold winter and we were online for most of the time. And these kids are getting to camp and they need you to be at your best, and they need you to be there. You can't be there if you have COVID. So you need to be at your best and be healthy while you're there.
Yeah, in the past we were like, you're in the business of like making a positive difference in the lives of children. Like we used to talk in generalities like that. Well, guess what, dudes and dudettes? You guys are now in the business of saving kids' lives, saving their mental lives, returning their childhood to them. Like, this is real, seriously awesome opportunity here of what you're going to do. Just like at the beginning when I said I wanted to be a doctor because I wanted to like help people's life. Like, you're all going to be doctors. You're all going to be social workers. Guess what? You're like all little Dr. G's running around. I mean, that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
And it's going to be so hard to figure out what's going on with these kids. You're going to have to really talk to them and really get to know them on an individual basis and get them to trust you so that they can start spilling their guts to you.
Well, and that's a huge opportunity, right? If you're in smaller cohorts with kids, you'll get to know them even better every year. So, or every day that you're with them. So I think that's a great opportunity for you to brush up on some of your get to know you skills. There's like websites, we'll put some in the show notes. That we've referenced before, but like there's literally a website called Conversation Starters World out there that has literally tens of thousands of get to know you questions and ways to just chat with kids, because they won't be used to that. For I'm teaching online right now, and the way conversation works is really weird because you have to unmute yourself and then you have to remember to wait your turn to talk. And only when the teacher calls on you. Summer camp, we're going to give them a socialization experience like they have not had for a whole year. So this conversation and doing that in a, like a graceful and polite and
Yeah.
delicate way, all of those things were, it's a gift that we get to give to kids this
Yeah,
summer.
well, and know what the gift back is also, the COVID silver lining here, Matt, is that what we found last year that we were not prepared for, meaning like we just didn't expect it, was that, in a good summer, you said it in your intro, like, a good summer is based on having good counselors, right? There's no doubt about it, cut
Yeah.
and dry. These kids and these counselors that we had last summer, after only 4 months of compromised life, they loved each other like I had never seen a group of people love each other. They loved these counselors treated these kids like they were their birth children, and
Mm.
these kids treated these counselors like gods. And it happened immediately, because
Yeah.
think about it, they have been lacking that kind of thing. They have only been with their parents, right?
Right.
And these counselors, I mean, that was only 4 months. These counselors have now been doing college from their dorms or their bedrooms at home. Everybody's been lacking socialization so much. And so be prepared for that. Be
Yeah.
prepared for your heart to just be like, you know, treated in a way that you just haven't felt in a long time, that these kids are yearning for this experience.
Mm. And we were going to talk about for new staff, and I guess for new staff they don't have any expectations, but I think we just set it up really well right there. Camp, you've heard us talk about this before. Camp is it's a tough job. It is the hardest and simultaneously the most rewarding job you will likely ever have in your entire life. And this summer that is only times two, times three, times four, times 100.
Yes.
But it is going to be incredibly worth it because of what you get to give to campers this year. So
Right.
new staff, if you're listening to this and you're on the fence, I get it that you're on the fence. I get it that it seems a little more risky. You could just stay home, and maybe there's some other like financial benefits of just staying at home. Kids need you. They need you more than you need that extra like $2 an hour
Yeah.
from working at
And I was
McDonald's.
blown away by the amount of new staff that worked with us last summer and that are working with us this year. People want this.
Yeah.
People are yearning. People who never knew what camp was really are now like, you know what, this camp thing, after what I've been going through in the last year and a half, this camp thing sounds awesome. And we're getting people like that. And I'm a big Three Musketeers fan. And I just picture like when they put their swords together, it's like all for one for all. That's what it's like. It's like never before has there been such purpose in what you're doing this summer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's literally like you're going to war, for like the right reasons, and like,
Mm-hmm.
God is behind you. Like you really feel like you're a medieval warrior. And when Steve Baskin, my friend who runs Camp Champions in Texas, he started his camp about 6 weeks before I did. So I was checking in with him constantly last year. And after he ran his orientation, let me tell you, staff orientation is a trip. That first day of staff orientation, be prepared to have your mind blown, just being
Yeah.
around all these people and all these
Yeah.
loving people and all.
Yeah.
But he told a story that I ended up retelling at my orientation about it's like a Henry VIII kind of famous Shakespeare thing. It's actually a true story where this young guy, Henry VIII, he was like at college and then he came back and his dad died. And all of a sudden he had to become the king. And they were in this like 80-year war with France. This was England, and they were getting their butts kicked. And everyone was like done with it. They were like disease. It was winter. They were like, we don't care. We'll speak French the next 100 years. And he got up and he was like, look, we're going to do this. And we are going to kick butt, and we are going to succeed in this. And all the naysayers, all the people that think that you're crazy working at a camp in the middle of a pandemic,
Yeah.
okay, they are going to look back and say, man, I wish I was there. I wish I was part of that awesome experience where you guys stuck your neck out and were able to do something that nobody had ever done before.
That's right.
And anyway, King Henry, they won their little battle, by the way.
Darn right.
And the camps that ran last summer, they won their little battle. We were the canaries in the coal mine, and the canaries came back just fine.
That's right. And I do think that this is going to look amazing on a resume. Camp people kind of understand what summer camp is in the employment world, and I think we're getting better at telling that story. But you get to say that you were a part of something like this, and it is going to, the logistics that you're going to learn, the safety practices that you're going to learn, the improvisation and the creativity that you're going to learn, the relationship building skills. There is almost no other summer experience that is going to be like that. period. Because with teachers, if you're going in to be a teacher, we have a curriculum to follow, there's like lesson plans to do, but at summer camp, your lesson plan is joy. You get to bring joy 24/7, and help kids go to bed on time.
All
That's
right.
it. So it's going to be
And
pretty
I have
awesome.
an and for you there.
Yeah.
So yes, everything Matt's saying is unbelievably true. Okay. And so here you are, you're this loving creature that's willing to dedicate your summer towards helping children, regain their childhood in the middle of a global pandemic. All right, man, you must be an awesomely loving human to be able to do that. Okay. But now guess what? You're coming to this camp and now you need to follow all these safety protocols, and you can't be hugging everybody, and
Yeah.
you can't be high-fiving every single kid, and you have to watch what you're doing, and you have to, wash your hands before that, and you got to wash the equipment, all this stuff. So there's this extra layer of care. Now, I do think, Matt, though, that the people this summer that didn't run last summer, I think they're going to have it easier than we did last year, because you now have gone through a year of this. People are now conditioned from this, right? College kids who are on campus, high school kids and such who have returned to school, they've gone through this a cycle. So it's not new to them. Last year, we were literally, it was like the first time that people were together in a mass amount, and their minds were blown on this. But I think what I'm seeing now is that people are used to it. And those people who will get freaked out about masks or whatever, that they're few and far between. Certainly kids don't really care. And what I'm seeing is high school and college kids are sort of used to it at this point too. It's really older people that I'm seeing that have a bug up their butt about it.
True. Well, and I also think, people are just used to it by now. But I would also say that means there's a bit of like fatigue when it comes to those things. So you as a camp counselor, I think we talked about this last episode, you need to be the best wiper that you have ever wiped. Wiping equipment, you got to be a pro at it. Wipe every spot on that basketball and do it properly. Don't just do it quickly because you got to wipe it and go. Everything is important. And that's part of my entire job when we're doing in-person school. I wipe down the stuff after people use it, and you got to do it right, even though it's tiring. So,
and even though it may not even be important at this point,
if it's a rule, you got to do it.
I'll do it. Right? Yeah. So I just want to tack on to that, Matt, that, if you were making a job description of what a camp counselor does or a camp administrator, anyone that works at camp, all right, and you're going to list the 500 things they do, like the 501st thing that you have to put on that list now, that's actually like the most important thing, is that you are officially part of the COVID police now. That's just it. Like you're part of that. Like you have to be part of the team that's making sure that people are following these rules, because it's like weakest link, brings us down. And you have to keep your eyes on it. In a big way. And you have to keep your eyes on that. And the kids are looking at you. They're seeing, all right, is he going to care? Is he going to have his mask on? Is he going to wash his hands? Right? They're watching you like hawks.
Yeah, for sure.
So you need to set the standard, be the role model for that.
Well, I think that's a great segue. The next question, we want the inside scoop, Andy. So you are a director. You are overseeing a ton of staff. How many staff this summer? How many frontline counselors are you overseeing?
Like 200.
Yeah. So many. And for reference, if you're new to the camp world, Andy, Liberty Lake is what you would call one of the very bigger day camps.
Large private day camp.
Out there. Large private day camp. But no matter what, there's going to be people supervising. You will have a camp director, and they have expectations of you as staff. So Andy, from your perspective as a director, what do you expect, even like beyond the job description, because expectations are in the job description, but what do you as a director, what do you expect of those frontline counselors, the ones that are directly working with kids? What are your expectations of them this year?
My expectations you want to say that are different than a typical year? Is that what the question is saying?
Sure.
Well, I think that everybody's going to have to be a little bit of a social worker. Okay. And let me explain that, because most of you probably don't know what a real social worker is, but it's someone that really understands why a kid is behaving as they're behaving. And when you see a kid acting out, my expectations with my frontline staff this year is not to just jump to conclusions, not to just reprimand the kid, not to just tell them what they're doing wrong, right? But to have a conversation with them about it, and not in front of everybody, and talk to them and ask why, and try to figure out like what brought them to that breaking point where they were doing that kind of thing. this is the don't judge a book by its cover year. What I've been telling my staff is that the kids are going to come to you like a box of chocolates. They're going to look like something on the outside, and we don't know what is going on the inside. And that's new kids, and that's returning kids.
Yeah.
Normal, well-adjusted kids are having a tough time right now, and they are acting out at home, and they are being defiant with their parents and such, because they want to get the heck away from them.
Yeah.
Right. So I think I'm optimistic that they're going to bounce back, because the kids generally do, but it's going to take time, and it's just going to take patience. On the Day Camp podcast that came out the other day with Dave Malter, I asked him a similar question, and his word was, I said, give me one word. He said, gentle. I need you to be gentle with the kids and be sensitive. Because I'll tell you right now, the parents have lost their patience with their kids at this point. They're jumping down their throats on everything. School, they have no relationship with these teachers. Come on. I mean, hardly,
It's hard.
It's not saying they're muting and unmuting and all that kind of stuff. So this is the first time now that they're going to have somebody that really cares about them, that's right in front of their face, that's not their parent.
Yeah.
And we need you to be like a psychologist practically with them. You need to really figure out what's going on and be sensitive, and don't jump to conclusions. And this is very hard for some people. It's very hard for the head cheerleader girl. Come on, everybody, let's go. Hey, why are you taking so long doing that? Blah, blah, blah. It's hard for that person, right? It's hard for the person that grew up in a military family where, Matt, I told you to put your socks away. Matt, that kind of thing. Like, this is going to take some reprogramming and rewiring for those folks. And the middle management people, your head counselors, are going to have to really be on top of them about that, and respectfully be redirecting them when they see and hear that kind of thing. It's normal camp normal camp counselor behavior.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I like gentle, because everyone's got their own counseling style. There's two extremes to that. You could be too much of an extrovert with your kids, like the cheerleader. You could be too militaristic. You could be too much of an authoritarian. But if you're gentle with all of those things, you can still be yourself. I can still be funny, but I'm a little less in your face funny than I normally am. That's kind of my style. You can be firm with kids, but you can be gentle and understanding, but you can still have clear boundaries and all those things. And I think it's just recognizing that you are not going to be right the first time, usually, right? Your assumptions are not going to be correct about why that kid took his mask off. And, the greatest gift that you can give to a kid this year is to not assume. If a kid takes his mask off in the wrong place, asking a curious question, as long as he's not spitting in as long as they're not spitting in another kid's face, you can ask, hey, Timmy, I noticed that your mask's off right now. Can you tell me what's up? And maybe Timmy was having a hard time breathing after running around and just needs a break, and needs you to say, oh, hey, do you need a break? You can go stand by this tree, take 2 minutes, and then put your mask back on. Then you've met that kid with compassion. That, like you said, Andy, that's something that they might not have been getting for the last whole year.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up an amazing point, Matt, which is that when people get put into leadership positions, whether you're a first-year counselor, first-year camp director, for whatever reason, a lot of people, it's just like they get, the power trip is sort of the word that gets used a lot of times, but I think that's a harsh word. But I think that they understand their responsibility is that they need to be telling people what to do. And what you realize, the older and wiser that you get, is that you actually modeled it amazingly. You ask questions. Don't just make statements and decrees, right? Ask questions, be curious, right? That's how you start conversations. Plain and simple, by asking questions. You're not going to start conversations by telling people what to do.
And I think that also speaks to, we talk a lot on our podcast about how to be a good co-counselor, and whatever your potting situations look like, you're going to be seeing other staff, and they're going to be making decisions with campers too. And, the worst thing that you could do is, if we were in that situation where my camper took his mask off and was kind of, iffy a little bit close to people, let's just say that's one of the COVID rules that my camper broke in that moment. The worst thing that you could do as a non-person in my pod, or even a counselor that's kind of near my pod, or whatever, is to call me out on that, or like tell on me. You can, again, be curious about that situation, say, hey, let me watch what's up right now, because maybe I can learn something from this situation. And then if something, there's going to be a boundary. If something is clearly unsafe, you're going to have to make a decision about how to intervene in that moment. And that's a great question to figure out how that'll work at your individual camp. Who do you talk to, et cetera, et cetera. But if someone's life is not being affected, or one of the COVID protocols is not, is being broken in a moderate way, or that's not putting someone at immediate risk, be curious and be a good coworker and offer some of that feedback, again, off to the side. You're not going to call that co-counselor out in front of their kids unless it's like super life-threatening and super
Right.
dangerous.
Please.
Yeah.
One thing I want to get to, Matt, also
Yeah.
is that, the people that are listening to this podcast, the people that are planning to work at summer camp in the middle of a global pandemic,
Yeah.
are a little bit like little Superman and Wonder Woman. There's no
Mm.
doubt about it. These are
Mhm.
superheroes kind of people. These are
Yeah.
essential workers. These are awesome individuals. I'm going to tell you right now, as awesome as you may be, you're going to be really stressed out this summer. Okay. This is a lot to handle. This is a burden. Okay. This is an emotionally taxing thing to do all the stuff that we're talking about here while managing groups of children and dealing with the freak out sessions and remembering the masks and washing hands, all that kind of stuff. And I saw it last year firsthand. Okay. I saw it in the eyes of my masked staff.
Mm-hmm.
I saw them reaching breaking points. And so I think it's really important for you to think about, in your situation, whether it's a day camp or a resident camp, how are you going to sort of refuel your tank on a daily basis? How are you going to find some me time? And what is it going to be? Like for me personally, I listen to progressive rock music and heavy metal and stuff like that. Like it's just my thing.
Nice.
Like if I listen to that for like 20, 25 minutes, like I'm literally refueled. I played basketball today. I went on a bike ride on Saturday for the first time in who knows how long, right? Like those are the things that work for me. What is it that you can do? And I say this especially for my sleepaway camp friends, my resident camp friends, who are going to be trapped, right? My friend Steve Baskin, again, he ran 9.5 weeks of camp or something. He had staff there for 11 weeks, okay, in a bubble, okay?
Yeah.
What are you and what is your camp director and such going to be doing for you so that on your day off or in the evenings that you can get some social interaction in some way, have some fun, get some exercise, listen to music, whatever it is, and those things. These are a priority. These aren't just like, if I could squeeze it in. Like you need to schedule this to keep your sanity so that you can be 100% for those kids the next morning.
Yeah, we did an episode on like how to properly take a break at summer camp, and I'll send a link to that one in the show notes, because I think a lot of that's going to be applicable. But the gist of what we got to that episode was that you might not be able, there might not be a staff lounge this summer for some people. You might have a pod lounge or something. Who knows what it's going to be like. But the answer might not be to be with other people on your break. It might be to like go climb a tree. We were talking as camp professionals in one of our networks, and they were saying, what are you as a director going to do this summer? And I said, my best piece of advice is to go right now and find a spot at camp that's kind of away from the action. That's not possible at every single camp, but deem that little spot as a nature spot, and don't tell anyone where it is. Just go there and go and sit. And that can be your spot to go and recharge, if that's where you're going to go listen to your heavy metal or progressive rock, or you're just going to go and stare at a tree or stare at a plant that is getting bigger and bigger over the summer. Or what I tell people all the time to do is lay in the grass and look at clouds. There's no better thing to do for me than that. But you have to, I think what Andy was saying too, is you have to set some of this up ahead of time, because there is the getting ahead of it before it gets bad. And it could get bad in the moment. So Andy, I'm wondering, from your experience with staff, those who, might have been okay the first couple weeks, but then, week 3 kind of hit, and it's Wednesday of week 3, and kind of the weight of COVID and behavior and all that kind of crept up. What advice, if they find themselves in the middle of it and maybe they haven't set themselves up for success enough, What do you advise those staff members to think about?
Well, I advise them to speak to their supervisor and to prep the supervisors in that when people need a break, they need a break,
Yeah.
even if it's in the middle of the day, right? So they need to set up some kind of systems for that,
Hmm.
because what happens with staff, again, my superheroes here, is that you're like, it's like a long fuse, right? And the fuse just goes, and you have to catch it before it gets to that breaking point. But unfortunately, most people, the profile of people that work at camp, especially in a global pandemic, is they're very selfless. And you see it on really hot days. I tell my camp parents, I say on
Absolutely.
really hot days, it's my staff that pass out, not my kids. They're well taken care of by my staff who are
Yeah.
passing out,
Right.
not thinking about themselves. And it's the same thing in this pandemic camp thing with pressure and stress. It's the same concept as being hydrated on a rainy day. Excuse me, on a hot day.
Yeah. And being hydrated on a rainy day. Sometimes people
Yeah,
even on
it's
a rainy
true.
day forget to
It's
drink.
tricky. It's very true.
It's true. Um, well, that's awesome. And I think that it's really important to be honest with your supervisors too,
Yeah.
and saying like, I'm really feeling this. No one in a global pandemic, no one is going to look down on you for being a little extra stressed this summer, or being just a little bit of extra stressed during the day. And from my perspective as a past camp director, and I'm sure Andy, this will resonate with you too, is the worst thing that can happen is that it's the last day of the summer or the last day of the session and you're sitting in your evaluation, and that's when you give feedback to the director about something that really made you upset on Tuesday, or something that was happening. That constant conversation. I know that Andy, you said off the top, I think that you've hired extra supervisors this year for another level of management in
Yeah.
there. And hopefully, even if your camp hasn't done that, you need to know as a counselor who your go-to is, who your person is. And every camp out there is going to be a little bit more prepared, or they should be more prepared for a consistent conversation of how you are doing as a staff member. So you have to get comfortable with being able to talk honestly about that. And maybe you can practice that with some of your friends. Maybe you can practice that with any teachers that you're still in school with right now. Maybe even
Yeah.
your parents, if you're listening. Some of those honest conversations are going to go a long way, because you need to have the vocabulary to express when you're not doing okay, and whether not doing okay means that, I'm not doing okay, but I think I can get through it, or I'm not okay, I need a second, or else my fuse is getting really short right
Yeah.
now.
Well, I have a little advice on that. One of my favorite management leadership books is called The Five Dysfunctions of a Team.
Mm,
And the the big point in that book is that you're not going to get anywhere without trust.
mhm.
And the only way to build trust between you and your supervisor, or between a supervisor and their staff, is to get to know them, right? You're talking about practicing tough conversations and stuff, and that's really important, and that comes with experience and time and age and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take much for me. If Matt was my supervisor or co-counselor or whatever, I just ask him what kind of music he listens to, what kind of sports he likes, what's his hobbies, like, kind of thing. How does he have any siblings? Where did he grow up? Like, the more you find out about people, and it goes back and forth, and they find out about you, you become a trusting person. That's how it works, right? That's
Right.
just how friendships start. Or even if you don't become friends, at least you create a bond with that person. And then when you are a little desperate, and you need a break, you have some concerns and that kind of thing, you're talking to somebody that you already know, and that already knows you. You have that level. So I think having those and what happens in camp, and day camps are the worst about this, because we have no time to do anything because we're at day camp. We got to leave. We got to go. We got to run. Right. Let's make that time. This is important this year more than ever. Knowing where the bathrooms are and all that kind of stuff, that's important too. But making relationships with your people that you're working with is super important. And I've been talking to a lot of experts about this kind of thing. And like, this is the year to do axe throwing and to do stuff with the people you're going to be working with early on, not waiting until the end of the summer. Oh, wow. Turns out Matt's a really nice guy. I had no idea, you, like, this is team building at that kind of level is going to be really important. I'm not talking about standing on planks and balancing people team building. I'm talking about social kind of team building where you get to know one another. Essential to surviving this thing.
Yep, and there's lots of stuff, and don't be perturbed if you're still mostly online right now. It's just as simple as 30 minutes of some get to know you stuff. You can
Mhm.
play like those Jackbox games that people play online, or there's lots of stuff. Again, that conversationstartersworld.com website that we talked about earlier will help just for a quick get to know you session, and it might feel weird and it might feel a little forced, but you just got to start building that surface area of connection for sure.
Yep.
So,
Important.
Andy, we're going to get into the last question here, and we've covered a little bit about this. You talked about socialization with other staff members, and you want to know what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
So, are there any, COVID specific questions or questions that a camp counselor should be asking or digging into finding out from their leadership team?
Yeah.
Because it'll
There's
depend. We can't just
tons
talk
of
for
stuff.
every camp here.
Yeah.
What are they going to want to know?
Well, just let me give you some insight that your camp directors during this time right now, and I've talked to many camp directors of camps that didn't open last summer, and they're very much in the same headspace that I was this year. I hate to say it, but they're not really thinking about this. They are not seeing this from your perspective. The supervisors at camps right now are worried about the trains running on time and the protocols and the PPE and the washing of the equipment and all that BS, frankly, that has nothing to do with camp, like the essence of camp, right? And they're not thinking of what you need and how you're going to see things. And I know because I did this last year, and I'm a
Right.
pretty compassionate person, and I missed a lot. A great example is lunchtime, right? Mealtime at your camp. You've been doing it the same way for years, right? Now you have these ideas on how you think you're going to be doing it during COVID times with whether it's social distancing and wrapping the food a certain way and all that kind of stuff. My staff worked their tails off. And the first, during mealtime and the first couple of weeks, it was rough because you went from most camps really try to empower the kids to, get their food and clean up and do all that kind of stuff. But in COVID times, it might be that they're like in a diner and you're basically a waiter or waitress. And after, while doing a whole day's work, that's tough. That's a lot of burden to put on. And it took a lot of creativity of my staff to talk to each other and teamwork with their supervisors and figuring out systems. Okay, you know what, Matt? You're going to go have to get the food, and I'm going to go get the pasta. And you're going to get the condiments and all that kind,
Right.
like that kind of stuff. And I'm afraid to tell you that your directors may not be thinking about this. So
Mm,
you're going to have to sort of help them think about this too. This
right.
is a we are all in this together thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And there is no direction book on how to run a camp in a pandemic. Yes, there are some camps that did it successfully last year, but it took time for them to figure out their systems and how to do things. And like Matt said, every camp is different. So
Yeah.
everybody's got their different logistics, the cafeterias laid out differently and all that kind of stuff. I mean, in America, we just got CDC recommendations where they said that kids need to sit 6 feet apart from each other in order to eat. I mean, that's
Right.
absolutely inane, and I'm sure that won't stick. But creativity is big,
Mhm.
and you and your team are going to have to look at situations and figure out. Okay, so this is how we're trying it for the first time.
Mhm.
Okay, but now we tried it, and now we know that it doesn't work great, and we're going to adjust it to this. There's a lot of that kind of creativity, and frankly, I was reiterating all summer last summer. What an amazing exercise to be able to go through, right? What a
Yeah.
unbelievable learning experience to be able to take something that's normally done one way and having to totally reconfigure it.
Right.
For safety reasons and practicality. So there's a lot of that involved. As much as you can sort of, if you're a returning staff, the more that you can think these things through and
Mm,
bring these things up during staff training, the more that the better things are going to be. Because I'm telling
mm.
you, 9 out of 10 times, your supervisor is going to literally go, "Oh my gosh, that is so great! Thank you for telling me that. I
Yeah.
did not think of that."
Yeah. Well, and if if your creativity comes within the confines of the COVID safety rules, you're good, right?
Mm,
And that is your opportunity. And I like, Andy, what you said there. It's not that the director isn't thinking about you because they're not compassionate. It's just that their to-do list is huge, and camp ultimately, the campers come first, and we need to make sure that things like safety things like the camper experience, that it is as smooth as possible. And your job is to help make it as smooth as possible. And there's two approaches that you could take as a camp counselor. And I think you'll know which one that you should take. Is one, you could look at the COVID restrictions, and even if your campers have to sit 6 feet apart for a mealtime, you could look at that and just be like, oh, okay, great. So we're gonna sit in a big circle the whole time. Or you could be the type of counselor who's like, okay, it looks like I need to bring a bigger picnic blanket for our for
Exactly.
our fairy cookout in the forest this summer, right? We need to look at the things we can control and the things we can't control, and take all those things we can't control, like the COVID rules, and we need to just accept those and move on. Because the sooner that we can do those, I've worked with some people, some camp people, and some teachers out there who their lives must be so sad right now because they are just constantly upset about the COVID restrictions and the rules that are in place. And if that's all you're thinking about, then life is going to be pretty cruddy, and it's going to make your life and your camp director's life and your supervisor's lives and the campers' lives really crappy. The complaining pandemic is almost just as bad as COVID. It's not just as bad as COVID. Pretend I didn't say that. But if you complain, that's going to spread. That's going to spread, and the kids are going to complain, and then it's going
Yeah.
to go down. It's
Like a
all
rainy day, right,
it's
Matt? Like a
snowball.
rainy day.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
and this is about the growth mindset,
Yeah,
right? This is how can we make this work? When I decided that my camp was going to run, and my
yeah,
team thankfully was with me 100%, our approach, we just looked at each other and we're just like, whatever they throw at us, we're going to figure out how to do it,
yeah,
And it's a
yeah.
challenge. It's like challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I want to say one last thing before we go to
Please,
your last part,
please.
because Matt was reiterating what I was saying, that the staff, the directors have a big long list of things, and our to do list is crazy, and we're talking to crazy Mrs. Wiedemeyer on the phone, and the state board of health, and the local health inspector, and all that, the mayor, whatever. We're dealing with all this junk, that's not camp. But at the same time, I just want to say that what I tell my staff on the first day of staff orientation, a new staff orientation, certainly, is that, it's all about the staff experience. It really is. I could run a camp in my backyard with Matt Hansberger over here and a red ball. And I am telling you, we will have the best damn camp. And these kids will have an awesome time because of the relationships that we're going to have with these kids, and the stuff that
Yeah,
we can do with a red ball, our creativity, right? The water trampolines, and the basketball courts, and the baseball fields, and all that kind of stuff. They mean nothing. You are what is important in this camp experience, right? And the setting is just secondary, right? It's
right.
all about the staff. You are you are a camp's greatest resource by far.
Mm,
And this summer, boy, oh boy, they are going to be so thankful of you even just showing up, and then kicking butt in the
yeah,
summer. I
yeah.
mean, I tell my staff, anybody that worked for me last summer, and it goes for this summer too, like I owe them. Like,
Mm,
I'm a camp director, like I owe them. Like anything they ask for the rest of their life, I
yeah,
am literally willing to do for them, because they don't have to do this. Like Matt said, you could go work at Target or whatever this summer. You could stay at home. I'm sure most camp counselors' parents would be fine if they just stayed at home, right?
yeah,
Um, but you're choosing to do like God's work. Really.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you're returning childhood to children who have lost their social skills,
yeah.
who have anxiety and depression and all these things. You're going to bring sunlight back to their lives. I mean, what a great opportunity.
Mm.
Thank you.
It is awesome. Um, yes, it's great. So we have confirmation. What we say at the top of the show, that camp directors have the most important job at camp. Andy just said it right there. Called it, stamped it, no erases. So it is true. So thank you for the work that you will do as a camp counselor this
Yes.
summer. So Andy, we're gonna go into our last section, which is EGGLE, our ever growing, ever learning. It's a tip or a trick or a game or a song or just a cool thing that you can do as a camp counselor to occupy a kid for 5 minutes to keep them entertained, because you're going to be doing a lot of that this summer. Your pod is going to have 5 minutes before it's your time to go into the dining hall for lunch, and you got to do something cool. So what's it going to be?
Well, at Liberty Lake last year, not only did we have a global pandemic, but we had tropical storms out the wazoo. We had
Right.
crazy weather. I never canceled camp in the history of my life. And we canceled camp twice last summer. And thank goodness we did, because like the second time, like my 40 by 80 tent, like got picked up and crumpled up like a freaking tin can. So we're putting in lightning protection. We're buying bigger tents this year, all this kind of thing. But the point is that, you know, there were many moments where we had to hunker down under tents and pavilions. And so every one of my staff has to have a little something in their backpack. And at Liberty Lake, we are about an hour away from Atlantic City, which is like, you know, a poor man's version of Las Vegas, where there's gambling and such. And so what I tell the staff is like, you know what? Kids never too young to learn how to play 21 blackjack.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Uno is a great game, of course. You know that I'm a big, huge Uno fan. But 21 is pretty good. You can play a lot of 21 with a deck of cards. And it's very simple. Kids just need to be able to add to 21. I think most like first or second graders are up can probably do that.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, kids love it. They go nuts.
Yeah.
You don't have to, there has to be no money involved, no chips
Yeah.
involved. They just want to see if they can do it, right?
Yeah.
So a deck of cards, learn how to play 21 blackjack, and tell them it's a life skill that they'll remember the rest of their life.
There you go. I love it. Thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.
My eggle this week is a name game. There is an official name for it, and just like in the summer camp world, there's a name that, and there's like a name on the name. We don't use the same name for anything. I call this the name dance wave, and this is the perfect get to know you, totally COVID friendly. You know, stand in a big circle with your pod, or maybe you can be close to your pod, whatever. Stand in a circle and all face inward, and then one at a time, you're gonna say your name, and it's gonna have a dance move associated with it. So it could be something as simple as I always make the joke, my name is Matt. It's like a floor mat. So I go down and I slam the floor, and that's my dance move. And then everybody one at a time goes around the circle and does my move and says my name. So it's Matt, slap, Matt, slap, 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 all the way around the circle. Everyone says my name. And then next to me, Andy goes, and Andy does whatever his crazy dance move is. And then everyone, Andy, 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 all the way around the circle. And you don't have to like go back or anything. Each kid gets to do it. But the benefit of this game is that every kid is verbally saying a kid's name. And it's really important that you as a camp counselor get name pronunciations right, and not just breezing over a tough pronunciation. Stop, learn the name, and then get everyone to say it and make sure they're saying it properly and going around. And then you do it with the dance move. There's a fun name dance associated with it. And you can even turn that into your cabin dance or your group count off to make sure everyone's there.
That's terrific. And a day camp, Matt, like mine, where I have new kids every Monday coming
Yep.
in, it's these kind of things that are so important to do on Monday mornings to get the new kids, you know, knowing who everybody is in the group and all.
And the most, knowing a kid's name, that is the way into making a connection with them. If you say hey you to a kid, you've instantly lost a couple points in their book. So
Yeah.
names are important.
And I've experienced situations with kids, new kids, and it's the end of their first week, and they literally still don't know the names of their counselors. And I'm just like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I think I know. I think it might be Mike or whatever. You know, like these games, they may seem silly. They're super important, and kids want to actually do them. And the one that Matt just described is the kind of game that you could actually add on to every
Yeah.
single week. So now you get 2 new campers, and you're adding a dance move and a name to the thing, right?
And how cool would it be if a camper came back, if they came week 1 and then they came back week 6, and if you still remember their dance move, that would be so cool.
That'd be killer.
That would be awesome.
That kid would be psyched.
That's your challenge for this summer. Beyond all the other challenges you're gonna have, that's your challenge for this summer.
That's going to be a fun, easy one.
Andy, thank you so much for joining me here. Andy, if counselors have questions, I know your schedule is busy, but maybe I'll get people to send them to me. But in the future, if someone's listening to this down the road and you have some time to answer them,
Oh, you could
how can
listen,
people
man.
get in
Anybody
touch?
can reach out to me. I get people reaching out to me from all over the world from the Day Camp podcast at this point. I get Facebook requests from everywhere. Andy at libertylakedaycamp.com.
Perfect.
You know, you can always, I am here because of the mentoring and the advice and the help of people who were my age when I was in my 20s and 30s. So I am constantly in give back mode and constantly in paying it forward mode. So I'm happy to help any young aspiring camp professional find their way.
Perfect. Thanks, Andy. If people want to get in touch with me, you know my email. It's matt@gocamp.pro. You can find me at Iskus, it's my camp name, on Instagram. And if you want to send a note of encouragement to Oliver, Oliver, we love you lots if you're listening to this, oliver.gregan.scd@gmail.com. And if you enjoyed our show, please leave us a review wherever you listen to the podcast. Whether you like it or not, your reviews, your honest reviews, will help people know what they're in for when they're listening to First Class Counselors. And don't forget, we talked about a lot of things in the show notes, past episodes. I have a link to Andy's book that he recommended. There's lots of great stuff there. And you can find our show notes at gocamp.pro/FCC. And as Oliver says every week, thanks for listening, friends. Camp is camp, and camp's all good.
Woo-hoo.